Hello. Our reading is from Mark 4. He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. And soon the grain is ripe. He puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come." Again he said, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on earth. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade."
Hello. This is Matthew 13. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of seeds, yet when it grows, is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into the 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough.
Last week we finished the summer of rest. We spent, I think, 10 weeks talking about rest in different ways. And I want to say I appreciate how seriously everyone took our communal day of rest last week. There was a group of people that showed up at the Vaughn's house. We kind of rescheduled, relocated the Springs. Then I know a bunch of people went out beach, and other people went to different springs. Some people just stayed home. And it was, I think, a relief to be unburdened. Not that we don't love getting together and having the regularity of coming on Sunday night, but I also think having pause, where we don't just talk about rest, but we also say, we're not going to do this. Every once in a while, we're not going to do this. We're going to get together with no agenda. And just be. We were talking at the Vaughn's house by the lake, and Bill asked, just spontaneously, "So what's the vision for Collective? Like, where are we headed? What does the future look like?" And it was a perfect segue to say we're about to start this vision series in the next few weeks. The answer, though, is participatory. What is the vision of Collective? We don't know. We don't know because Collective hasn't told us yet. And maybe you've picked up on this over the last few years. This is not a top-down, dictated vision kind of community, because the same we, as the we in the community statement, wants to know what the vision is, so we have to ask the same we. This is us. So next week, we're going to embark on this new season of transition for Collective. We're calling it Compass Orientation for the next leg of the journey. Shout out to Baylor Watts for an awesome graphic. Good stuff. And if you hear nothing else, you need to know that it is incredibly important that you be here as much as you possibly can for the next 7 weeks, and that you share with other people who you regularly see here that it's really important that they be here. Again, this is a participatory season. And you know Collective. I run into people, not often, but from time to time, and because they haven't been around in a little while, they apologize, and they make excuses, and they look embarrassed, and they say, "Oh, I really need to get back to Collective. I'm really missing it. I should be there. I want to be there." And I go, no, please don't. It's not that kind of church. No guilt, no shame. That's actually the kind of church we're trying to set people free from. So don't do that. Please don't put that back on me, because that's something I've walked away from. Be here. If you're going to be here because you want to be here. The honor of your presence is always requested, but it's not expected. It's not obligatory. But for this season, we are going to put some pressure on you and on the people who are not in the room tonight to be here. Not because there is some sort of twisted religious obligation or there's some threat of divine guilt or punishment, but because the only way this works, the only way we get the best of whatever the vision is for us for the next 4 or 5 years, the only way that's possible is if everyone, as many people as consider themselves at all a part of Collective in any form or fashion, participate. And we'll get into that more in the next couple weeks and sort of explain the process. The point is, be here. Please be here. It's essential for our future together. And if for some reason you absolutely cannot be here, please, please, please still contribute. There will be ways that you can give feedback online, and we'll let you know how you can do that. But your feedback to the questions that we're going to be asking every week during this series are going to directly shape the vision of the future of Collective. And so in the next 7 weeks, we're together going to kind of build the compass and get our bearings. And then this community together will decide direction. Where are we going? Where are we headed? I know we're all overachievers, and we all think we can do everything. We can't do everything. And in fact, we can diffuse a really, really good thing if we waste our energy trying to do everything. So what we need to decide together in the next couple of months is, what should we do? As a congregation, as we move forward, as we go through all this transition, what should we do? What should be our focus? Because sure, there's lots of great things we could do, and we would love to do a lot of those great things, but we can't do everything. So what should we do? Now, next week, we're going to begin this transition process by chartering as an autonomous United Methodist Church. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. We're going to have a brief service. It's going to feel like it usually does on Sunday night, but it's going to conclude with the celebration of chartering as United Methodist Church. It's also going to include certifying Dave and our good friend Ian Campbell, who is now already serving as a pastor in the Methodist Church. We're going to certify them through the newly chartered Collective Church as candidates for ministry in the United Methodist Church. So it's going to be a special night. If you can, again, please be here. Now, it's fascinating how diverse Collective is, especially as I sort of thought back over the last 5.5, 6 years. Because we have had folks who for a long time, and maybe those who still will not call this a church. It's not going to happen because they don't go to church, but they love Collective. And for those people, chartering sounds threatening and maybe suspiciously like a step towards organized religion, and not in a good way. But for some with really positive religious backgrounds, and especially those with some experience and some love for the United Methodist Church, maybe this feels like sort of an exciting, natural next step. It's not one or the other. There's plenty of room for everybody. You don't ever have to call this a church if you don't want to. If this has been church since day one, that's fine. Nobody cares. We're excited to be able to get together and do the stuff we're doing. So I want to try and thread that needle, though, and just remind us what it is and what it isn't. So I'm going to shamelessly steal Brian McLaren's material, which he shamelessly steals from a published PhD dissertation on social movement theory. And part of what's happening with spirituality in the West is what he phrases a movement from organized religion, which is for self-protection, to organizing religion, which is for the common good. And so picture institutions and movements in a sort of romance, in a dance with one another, in conversation with one another. And what they're doing, movements and institutions, are forming and deploying, he says in this new sort of future movement of religious faith, especially in the West, forming and deploying not religious affiliates, but spiritual activists, known not for what they believe, but for the way that they live. It's almost like they would be known by the way that they love. Somebody should write that down. That might stick. So a couple things, basic vocabulary. Communities, individuals, families, and organizations. There should be a space in there. Individuals, families, and organizations linked to a common environment, collaborating for the common good. One of the things I love about the Dan's video that we just showed is the footage of downtown. So for us, the focal point, the locus, the nucleus of our work is DeLand. And maybe we'd say even more specifically, the downtown DeLand community. Though we have people from all over Volusia County, we have people from all over Central Florida, we have people who consider themselves integral parts of this community from all over the world. And I just was thinking this afternoon fondly of so many of these people that we know and love. Jairo and Chris are in DC and Denver and Canada. Terry and Sarah are in St. Augustine or South Africa some parts of the year. Mike and Sophie in North Carolina. Aaron's in Boston. Ian and Natalie were in Atlanta, but now they're back in Lakeland. Brooks and Thalia in Tampa. Nate, Kathy, Shanti's in Sweden. Imran is in Allahabad, India. Pete is usually in LA or Ireland. Ivan and Amanda are in New Zealand, back and forth to Tokyo. There's not that many people in this room, right? This is kind of crazy. So there's this larger community, but collective, even as an organization in DeLand, in the DeLand community, is actually a community in and of itself. It's community within a community. Because if you look around you in this room, what you're going to see are individuals, families, and even organizations. And again, I started thinking about Kayleen and Tree of Life and Cafe Da Vinci and The Table and Neighbors and Trilogy and Persimmon Hollow and Main Street DeLand Association and All Saints and Faith and DeLand Pride and Collective Cares and even organizations within organizations. Because we've got a core team and brain trust and finance and trustees and building and property and our care team and we have volunteers and we have the band. So if your first instinct is to go, oh God, institution, that's terrible. Organization, no, we don't want to do that. We don't have any of this without organization. It's communities within communities. The point is, community within community, the key, the question always has to come back to, are we collaborating for the common good? Because that was sort of the core of that definition, right? Common environment, collaborating for the common good. And even though our environment now includes the world because of the internet, are we collaborating for the common good? So that was community. Institutions, organizations which conserve the gains made by past social movements. And this is where we get maybe the best and our ideal of the word conservative. Because I have a feeling if I asked for a show of hands of people in the room who think they're conservative, it probably would be not all that many. But I want to give a couple of examples. A couple of years ago, we voted as a nation to legalize gay marriage. And I think right now, there are many organizations who are fighting for civil rights and human rights, like the HRC, Human Rights Campaign, all the way down to Collective Cares, to DeLand Pride, to this church. And what they're doing is trying to conserve the gains that were made by prior social movements. They are, by definition, conservative. And Collective, as a congregation, has made some gains with regard to innovative expressions of spiritual community because of the way we handle things like theology and practice and radically inclusive community. And we would like, as a congregation, to conserve those gains. Maybe we could say we're conservative in the most progressive way. And then there's social movements. These are organizations which make proposals or demands to current institutions to make progress towards new gains. So part of our history as a congregation is what we would call innovation, experimentation, spiritual entrepreneurship, new and exciting movement. And that was a part of a long story of proposals and demands that were made to the institutions. First, Methodist DeLand, the Florida Conference of the Methodist Church, even the Christian tradition. We made some proposals and demands of those institutions to make some progress, to move in a particular direction. And like in Dan's video, to make some progress around how it is that we understand God, around how it is that we live love. So based on what I'm hearing, we're sort of in between. We're in between where we've been, we're in between where we're going, and organizationally we are in between institution and social movement. Maybe we call that a group. Better yet, since we don't need binaries, and we try to practice around here what might be called non-dual consciousness. In the Christian tradition, this is Christ consciousness. Even simpler, we could just say we're trying to practice Christianity. Even more simply than that, if you're not into that word, faith, spirituality. The point is we don't need binaries. And so rather than us being in between, maybe this is a season where we're learning again to live with the tension that we are both, or that we at least embody pieces of both. We're grabbing what we hope will be most vital from both of these things. And this makes sense because without movements, institutions stagnate. Without institutions, movements evaporate. And so there is a symbiotic relationship between the two. Movements bring energy, they bring innovation, they bring fire. Institutions bring stability, they bring sustainability, they bring resources, right? This is what you guys have all been saying. Some movements successfully inject their values into the institutions they challenge. Other movements create their own institutions or they pass away. And again, not even this is binary because we're actually doing both. We're kind of injecting our values into the United Methodist Church and into the Christian tradition. We are also creating our own institution, a church, an autonomous incorporated organization. And the hope is that we somehow continue to wrestle with and find a way for Collective, the institution, to be able to preserve the gains we've made, and Collective, the movement, to keep making more gains. I mean, I think this is what Sharon said. This is what some of you have been saying, is that these don't exist as separate things. This is a part of who we are. This is a part of how we are. McLaren says it like this: vital movements call people to passionate, sacrificial, personal commitment. Sustainable institutions create loyalty across generations, that should sound familiar, through evocative rituals and traditions, which we're going to come back to in a minute at this table. Again, which of these is collective? Vital movements or sustainable institutions? Both. Which of these is celebrated and perpetuated and amplified by chartering and having our own building? Both. Right? We need both to do both. Jesus says the kingdom of God is like gardening, an organic movement. Jesus never says the kingdom of God is like warfare or the kingdom of God is like an assembly line. These are institutional actions, but it spreads through seeds, sown into systems like soil, sown into systems to grow, or like leaven through dough. The seeds of the message, the seeds of people who personally embody the message. That's what Rob's talking about. We leave here and we go and live in a particular way in the world. And the seeds of communities who socially embody the message. And we do this in the way that we live as a group, not just as individuals, but the things that we choose to care about moving forward. That's how we socially embody that. And so when we say the message of Jesus, this organic movement that he calls the kingdom of God, is not for Christianity, which is an institution, but for humanity. Remember the end game? The common good of the global community. When we say this, remember the definition: individuals, families, and hopefully not one particular, but hopefully the common good of all organizations, of all institutions. A vital institutionalized movement for the common good of all the other movements and all the other institutions, or to put it in the terms of the call of Abraham in Genesis 12 that gets the whole biblical story kicked off, a tribe for all tribes. A tribe that can look at the world and ask the question, what does it mean for us to organize who we are and what we have to best resource the common good of all the other people, knowing that people organize into movements and into institutions and into families and into groups. So how can we be in service to that in our own particular way? Everybody take a breath, shake it out, because that's a lot of information. Let's pause for a sober moment of reality, because Dave mentioned history, not just Methodist history, but church history. People have been trying to do this, to hold this tension of movement institution for over 2,000 years. And what we need to be reminded of regularly, we'll probably say this every week during this sort of vision series, and then especially every week when we move into the new building, we don't have a magic pill. We don't have the special sauce. Collective doesn't have some sort of secret potent prayer or special knowledge. And we have to become increasingly aware that the more that we institutionalize, the more we will fail, the more we will flounder, the more we will become hypocritical like all the others that have come before us, and that's okay. That's okay. Because the alternative is, if we're a movement that chooses not to do this, the other option is to die, right? To stagnate, to fall apart. It's okay for us to pursue this because the good work is still worth the risk of organizing. It's still worth the risk of institutionalizing. And this is why forgiveness and grace are so central to the Christian movement and so absent from much of the Christian institution. Because believe me, I am a romantic. I'm way too optimistic. Ashley and Kara actually called me out on this week. Because I would love to think that the new building and chartering and autonomy, exciting new connections with Stetson Wesley, and the freedom from the autonomy to do our own thing, that this season is going to be the promised land. I would love to think that. Like we've made it, and now it's all going to be amazing and great, and we're going to manifest our best ideals imagined in the community statement. But come on. I mean, this is not the promised land. We're just getting better organized and equipped to wander, and we're just going to figure out what to do in the next 40 years. And part of the way I know this is it took less than an hour after I signed that paper for things to get rough. I think the exact quote was, "I just spent $1 million on someone else's problems." the point of this is, and I guess I should have said I spent someone else's $1 million on someone else's problems, but the point is I'm going to let you down. And for the most part, I probably already have. And if you've stuck around through that, thank God that for you, collective is not about me, and it shouldn't be. And collective will let you down. Whatever you think about it, group, movement, institution, collective will let you down. Whatever your best dreams about this move and the transition and our bright future, and it will be a bright future. I'm not taking that away from it. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be lots of energy, but this is also going to include lots of letdowns. In lots of ways, it doesn't and never could live up to the ideals that we dream for it. But that's okay. Again, we're people. We're not perfect, but we're resilient. We are resilient, and we're trying our best to live with love and with grace and forgiveness. And so my hope is that you will decide right now, and this is the thankless, unsexy, bitter work of grace and forgiveness, that you decide right now that when I and when collective and when the different leadership groups let you down, when we hurt you, when we disappoint you, when the building is less than you hoped it would be, and when chartering is more of a burden than it is a help, when we fail to live our own professed value, when we fail to live up to the community statement, and I've learned more in the last couple years than ever in my life that I'm an asshole. When we fail, the hope is that you will choose now that when that happens, not if, but when it happens, to give us grace, to forgive us. Or maybe we could say it like this, that when the institution is inevitably an institution, you continue to practice and embody and remind us of the movement, of what started this, of what will carry us forward. And that is not a charter, and it's not an incorporation, and it's not a denomination or a building. It is you all. It is us. We will move forward, and we will organize. And we're going to continue to live in that cycle. The organic movement Jesus preaches about manifests this culture of joy and justice and risk and hope, courage, service, creativity, a willingness to suffer, but a demand of nonviolence. And it's the culture of the movement that's contagious. It's the culture of that movement that made it worth trying to preserve by organizing and institutionalizing, to sustain and to perpetuate. It's the gains of the movement that made it worth risking institutionalizing. And maybe, because maybe it would carry forward the love and the practice and the community that are harbored in the name of God. And so, like all startups, we have been much more on the movement side for years because we've been living with this really exciting, intoxicating creativity and risk and growth and failure and hope and exciting new ideas and events and approaches and partnerships and possibilities. And we're becoming more aware that the pendulum is swinging, that we're in the season where we're transitioning to lean more into the institution. Formal denominational affiliation, chartering, structured leadership, new facilities, responsibilities, liabilities, all the different abilities. We have been, right? We have been, and we are becoming. But we are both. We are both, and we have to be both. For as long as we can, we have to be both. We need to, we must be both. Because we will move, and we will organize, we will innovate, and we will sustain. We will make innovative gains, and we will imagine ways of preserving those gains with integrity. And notice, in each of these, it is we. We. And that's not me and the staff, and that's not the leadership teams, that's we. We all are responsible for doing it. Not a corporate entity or a denominational overlord or a faceless religious tradition. We are collective. We are collective. And the day that ceases to be the case, shut it down, and we'll start a new movement, and eventually we'll screw that up. But it's got to be we, right? Or it's nothing. Vital movements call people to passionate, sacrificial, personal commitment. Sustainable institutions create loyalty across generations through evocative rituals and traditions. Vital movements call people to passionate, sacrificial commitment. Jesus is crazy. He gets killed for it, but he says things like, come follow me. If you want to follow me, take up your cross, whatever the hell that means. Anyone who wishes to save their life will lose it. And if you're willing to lose your life for the sake of this message, this organic movement, you'll actually find your life. He says, here is my body. Here's my body given for you. And here's my blood shed for you. Sane, stable people don't say things like this. He says, those who come after me will do even greater things than I've done. I don't want to put a bunch of pressure on you guys, but you're the ones who have come after him. Vital movements call people to passionate, sacrificial, personal commitment. You guys choose to be a part of this because you choose to be a part of it. And sustainable institutions create loyalty across generations through evocative rituals and traditions, intergenerational loyalty. A table that calls all generations to the same table. Evocative rituals like bread and wine, like body and blood. Rituals that rehearse the communal embodiment of this movement. The rituals that over time become traditions, like movements that over time become institutions. Rituals that communicate traditions like an open table, like unconditional hospitality, like no one will ever be turned away. This table, because it is unconditional, because it is non-dualistic, because it subverts all binaries and boundaries in service of radical welcome, this table holds the tension of movement and institution. Every week, this table holds this tension. It does not resolve it. It doesn't need to, it never will. It holds this tension. Because sure, this table is set by an institution. Very often it's set in the context of an institution. It is preserved and perpetuated by an institution. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here 2,000 years later if these gains had not been preserved. But the love and the grace, the welcome and the challenge, the call to action, and the life that is harbored in the rehearsal of this table inspire a movement. Every week, they inspire a movement. They propel forward in human history the communities that embody this life, this mystery, this just and generous way of being. This table invites us to eat and drink and to be held in the same good tension. They invite us to come to terms with the fact that we cannot and we should not resolve it, but we can surrender to be held by it. To move and to be moved, and to give ourselves to sustaining this movement that is worth giving our lives, apparently. The table of this beautiful and vital tension is set for us tonight. As always, it is open to us, and it is open to all people. And no one will ever be turned away. When you're ready, feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup.